Hello and good evening. My name is Gregory Jenkins. I just want to thank you all for coming tonight. We're going to start off. This is our third town hall meeting on arts and culture that the City of Somerville, the Arts Council, Resi Stat, the Mayor's Office have put together for you. And just a little bit of sort of bookkeeping. At the very end of the presentation, we do have sort of tons of ample time for Q&A. If you all want to speak, just sort of post something in the chat and I'll be going through and sort of monitoring the chat and we'll sort of come to you in that order. Next slide, please. So the interpretation as well, we do have, there's closed captioning as well as interpretation in Spanish. If you need an interpreter, let's just pause there and let folks be able to read this. Next slide, please. So the agenda is basically we're going to be doing sort of presentations. I know a number of you, this is our third town hall meeting. In the first meeting, there was a lot of sort of discussion around sort of 5 key points. And some of the conversations that we as staff have been having and a lot of the work that we've been doing since September is really revolved around those sort of 5 key things that you all have brought up about issues of surrounding money for the arts, space and space development. There was an issue of tax abatement, and then there was a situation around Art Farm and different sort of opportunities. And then there was also discussion about sort of a long-range cultural plan. So the agenda isn't necessarily going to take like on a bullet by bullet point of the 5-point plan, but I think what you'll sort of realize as we get through this agenda, sort of the work that we've been doing within the city to address some of the concerns that you had in September. And then we also had a meeting in October that was more specific about the cultural plan. So a good part of the agenda tonight is going to be also talking a little bit about the breakouts and the meeting that we had in October around cultural planning. So the next slide, please. So unlike in October, the mayor is here to join us, and which will be great. And he can, field questions and answers again from you all at the end. And myself, Kristen Selgist, who I think a lot of you have known or have seen in these meetings, is the director of Somerset, and she's also sort of the Arts Council's liaison. And then we also have a number of community members here that are going to be presenting a little bit more about the work that we did in October. Next slide. So funding for the arts. And this is, the mayor will take over from here.
Thanks, Greg. Good evening, everyone. Hey, before I get started, yes, I have an eye patch. It is for a particular medical reason. I was going to try to honor the artists in the community, particularly the opera stage performers, and give you a mayoral rendition of Pirates of Penzance, but frankly, I couldn't pull it off. So I'll just have to deal with it. Please excuse the look. But I'm pleased to be that you've all tuned in here, either on the Zoom meeting or on the live stream, the city's channel, or YouTube Live. We appreciate it and certainly appreciate all the input and advocacy you put forth as we recap where we've come over these last several months, where we're at, where we want to go. I first want to state that I hope you're all staying safe and healthy, and I hope no one you're close to has been lost as a result of COVID. If that's the case, I'm deeply sorry, and my heart goes out to you as we are across the threshold in a very dark period, probably the darkest and coldest period and deadliest period of this pandemic. But and talking about the arts gives us some greater sense of humanity and hope as we think about the future. So a brief reprieve tonight as we engage together. And I also want to recognize that many of you are also hurting financially. And rest assured, we'll talk a little bit about what we're trying to do to help. And then not just myself, leaders at the local, state level are working hard to advocate, especially your state delegation, your city council, and local officials around the region to make sure that, fight to make sure you get assistance to carry you through for this time. So I just want to state that to start off. The last time I was with you all, I gave a brief description of the funding. At that point, we were seeking to distribute to the arts community. We sought $500,000, as I stated we would, from the city council, and they approved. I do want to thank the entire city council. I never doubted they'd support it because they've been champions of the arts and the creative economy here locally. And I want to thank them for their support and their advocacy. We also, many of you brought this point up, we were seeking to add another $500,000 in CARES funds. If you recall, I know many of you are well aware, the challenge we've had in this is really bureaucracy. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts, in the Commonwealth, there are 3 recipients of CARES funds. Barnstable County, they got it as a county. The city of Boston, and everyone else falls into the category of the umbrella of the Commonwealth. The city of Boston has adopted a certain section of the CARES Act, I believe it's Section 5, which allows them to distribute money to certain small businesses or categorize certain operations as small businesses. In this case, artists and entrepreneurs, which will allow these funds, types of funds, to be distributed to you. The Commonwealth has refused to make that interpretation. This has been, without saying, very frustrating. As recent as today, in a meeting that I facilitated with leaders from around the region, including the city of Boston, as part of I chair the Metropolitan Mayor's Coalition. We met with Senate President Spilka and brought this to her attention and try to work with her staff to advocate that the Commonwealth do not cease to rigidly interpret the CARES Fund Act so we can get this money out to you and other business operations that are hurting. So we are on top of that. I'm sure you have questions. We continue that advocacy. I would ask, when you ask me what you can do, call the governor's office, call Senator Spilka's office. We can give that information. Speak to Leo, wherever you live, your state reps and senators. Many don't understand the disparity between what Boston's doing and the rest of the Commonwealth's doing. I credit the city of Boston. I'm really disappointed in the governor and the Commonwealth for not allowing this to happen. But that's where we are, and that's not to be discouraging. That's just want to give that status that the fight continues. But it's been a slog. In the meantime, we did get that $500,000, I believe. Much of it, and Greg can go into how it's been distributed at some point. I believe I might recap some of that. Can we get to the next slide, please? Again, this is the funds I just mentioned that we were seeking available to support arts and organizations, and that the state is very rigid in their interpretation of the statute. Next slide, please. So far, we've awarded more than $518,000 in grants for COVID relief, and the breakdown is here between cultural organizations, BIPOC, individual support. Next slide. So organizations were reviewed when we distributed these grants and evaluated the applications that were based on need and pre-existing PPP loans and so forth. BIPOC was reviewed by the BIPOC community members. Some project grants had no summable connection, either had taken place in another city like Boston, et cetera. And some individual fellowship grants submitted were submitted by non-summable residents. And this gives you a breakdown of where the initial monies were distributed. Next slide. And but I do want to make the point before Greg goes into the LCC grants that we understand the need's probably even greater. When we, as a community, committed to $500,000 in city funds, as well as distributing $500,000 in CARES funds, because there's a need for it. So that doesn't mean we'll stop advocating and trying to find solutions to meet that need. But I just want to give you a snapshot on that, and Greg will go into the LCC grants, and then I'll pick it up again.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of you know that the state, because of state budget issues of our LCC grants have been delayed. There is this deadline coming up on the 14th. Some folks have asked a question too, can we apply for this COVID grants and at the same time apply for LCC grants? But we've been telling everybody, yes, you can. The LCC grants are very much at the heart of what the city and the council has always been doing for years and years and years in terms of supporting, organizations in the community as well as schools. A lot of the school arts programs are supported through the LCC grant program. In the past, like 3 years, the mayor very generously has been matching the LCC grant program. And so we're sort of been boosting that for the past 3 years. I would say we've been averaging around $75,000 to $80,000 that we're giving back out to the community. And I just want to mention that, this deadline is coming up. It is soon. And it is going to be very much a forward, project deadline in the sense of, next March through December. I would highly recommend, propose what you want to do, COVID or no COVID. If we're still in a situation come, April where things are shut down, and hopefully we're not, we can always readjust a little bit like how we've been doing this past, 9 months. So, but thanks a lot for your support. And again, the community members, educate these grants. We have panels process. It's a great process that engages the community, gets a lot of people involved. So just want to thank you again for that. Next slide.
As I mentioned, well, we understand there's a greater need beyond the good work we work with the council and the community advocated for. For some context, last year's, so many months have passed by, so much has gone on. When we did the LCC grant awards, I stood with Greg Jenkins and others in the community. We committed to seeking another $100,000 in the FY21 budget as part of the LCC grant fund. We are seeking to approve the 2021 budget. There was a lot of uncertainty because of COVID. There still is. However, the good news is we are going to work, and I will be working with the city council, and at some point by the beginning of the calendar year, mid-fiscal year, as we say, we will be seeking to add another $100,000 to the LCC fund. And so that'll be early in 2021 sometime. So again, we'll work with the council, we'll work with all of you. Again, even with this, we're clearly aware that the need's probably bigger, but we wanted to fulfill our commitment that we made many months ago. And hopefully that'll help support the many great projects. Next slide. I just want to talk about some of the additional, remind everyone about some of the additional support that is available. Next slide. We would strongly encourage people to visit ma.gov/coronavirus help. There are far more resources in this comprehensive guide than we could get into right now. We want to know that there is help there for you. We can help you navigate that as well. We know that people in the arts community, through no fault of their own, are struggling. And so don't try to decide if you're worthy of the funding. If you are struggling, and many people are, I encourage you to please apply. And let us figure out and help facilitate what resources will help you most. Thank you. I'm going to hand it off now. And Greg, you're going to take on the arts and cultural work.
So, excuse me. Just want to give you sort of an overview of sort of the work that we've been doing since, the beginning of, not necessarily the beginning of COVID, but a lot of the work that we've been doing during the COVID period. Next slide. And some of this you'll end up seeing quite a bit of. As the mayor had mentioned too, we do get obviously a budget, from the city through the city council. And last year, which was last fiscal year, we had an ample budget to do our festivals, do a lot of the programming, but at the same time, we couldn't do that. And we quickly, with our colleagues, Aritza, Rachel and Heather, we've been sort of doing this Home Alone series where we're hiring, artists to do presentations. And I just looked up and we've done, 30 presentations since April, and it's gotten $9,000 out to support the community in that way. Next slide. Public art, a lot of you know, the mayor's always, I do think that Somerville's been a great sort of venue for public art, and both temporary public art and then sort of more permanent pieces. These are some of the pieces you've probably seen around. I think the last time we presented, Furman did a tree sculpture at Marshall Park. Amanda Hill did that large mural on CHA, the Cambridge Health Alliance. Alexander Cato just did the, work over it on the Gaucho and Lower Broadway. We were really, really fortunate to push through the Mystic Mural program, and we had 10 youth, again, with the mayor's, support with the summer jobs program that, the city's always supported. We were able to hire 10 youth to work on the Mystic Mural again, and went over incredibly well. It was a 5-week session instead of 6-week. And then, our work within the sort of Just Us Somerville group and the BLM mural. You know, some of the outcome on that was a little tough in the sense of how it eroded, but it was an amazing public process, great public community process that we all should be, you know, thankful for and grateful to have happen. Next slide. This is a particular program that my colleague Rachel and Heather were very much involved with. We reached out to the senior, you know, Council on Aging, Cindy Hickey, and sort of mentioned that we'd love to be doing sort of more programs directly for seniors. You know, so we created this sort of series of having performers go and perform over at Brady Tower and then also at Cape and Court. Next slide, please. This is Marcus Santos, Alana Kotz. Next slide. This is a project that our, you know, the director of communication, Denise Taylor, had this really amazing idea, sort of came to the Arts Council, came to myself and Aritza Meneval to talk about how would we honor, you know, those that have died from COVID from in Somerville specifically. And what we came up with is this idea of, you know, of an empty chair and then placing them around locations within Somerville. These are the 6 photographers that, you know, we ended up bringing on board. It's gotten a lot of great attention. It was a beautiful project, a beautiful way in which to honor those that we've lost in the community. It was just a very positive thing. And I think the photographers too were really pleased with the work. The next couple of slides here, you'll see some of this work as well. And again, that the website has all of their work plus a series of essays as well. Art Farm, you know, there's not a lot to tell you than what we sort of brought up in September. There has been a couple of more new meetings internally with the new design crew around the pump house. Art Farm's moving forward in the sense of aligning it with the pump house. And what we hope is that that design process and the community process for the pump house will actually be rolling out in you know, the spring of 2021 in terms of the community-based meetings coming up in January and February. And then they'll finalize designs, start to get all of this back out to bid, and then hopefully in the spring of 2020 that both the pump house, the underground Tupperware that's essential for the sort of the sewer project line work that's going in under Union Square, and that'll get aligned with the physical art farm as well. And all of that will come online in 2022. Next slide, please. Some of you, we've mentioned this before about zoning in the arts. Some of you may be new to this, but in December, you know, the city passed some groundbreaking, what's considered, you know, called form-based zoning for the city, sort of helping to relieve a lot of variance issues that the planning department has to go through all the time. A lot of uncertainty, both within the developing community, within even individual homeowners who may want to even just put a dormer on their house. Everything would end up becoming a variance. And so this new zoning really has created a lot of streamlined process. But through that and through your own advocacy, you know, we really looked at some of the transformational districts within the fabrication district and mid-rise, high-rise, commercial core. And through your advocacy and the mayor's support, we're able to basically create a 5% set aside within zoning. And even within Boynton Yards, there's actually a section that's 10%. And so out of this, you know, what we hope is that we're going to help. This is coming back to your, you know, the issues of infrastructure, more space, that through the zoning and through development that the cultural community will start to realize and envision a lot more space and opportunities within this new transformative zoning. Next slide, please. And then through that, obviously, there's a lot of detail and minutia to it. And we're very fortunate. Kristen Selgis has been really instrumental on this and working with our own planning community. But we've reached out to the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and they too are helping us devise a survey, start to look at all of the parcels and look at the cultural spaces within the city, and to start to analyze which ones are at risk, which ones, how do we help stabilize them, So it's a long sort of process, and a number of you that are here are actually on this task force committee. We've had 2 meetings already with the committee, and we're planning on hopefully meeting at once every 3 to 4 weeks and keep rolling out. And I think by next year, early January, February, you'll start to even hear more about some of the recommendations that the task force has as it relates to looking at the zoning and working within the city for that. Next slide, please. And this is just, again, some of a group on the Cultural Space Task Force. A lot of you probably know them. A number of the folks that are here that are artists are either, the mayor knows Risa Blattman very well. She and the council and a number of people in the community have, pushed to see more art space in the city. Callie Chapman is a dancer. Randall's an artist. He's been involved with Brick Bottom. Stephen's sort of new to us and very much engaged. Barbara, it's a great group of folks. Kevin Gatlin is from the Winter Hill Bank. Then there's a series, Sarah, Tom are within the city. We have a city councilor, Bill White. Probably should have put that in there more officially. An architect who's on the ZBA. So it's a really good group of people, and I just want to let you all know more about who's on there. Some people have approached me recently to say they'd like to get involved. At this point, I think that the membership is pretty full, and it's really even kind of tough to get everybody together during COVID too. So, but I do think it's a good balance of folks and a good representation of expertise and skills that are ultimately going to be making recommendations, both to the Arts Council as well as to the mayor about how to sort of really unlock and unleash this zoning and other recommendations and policies for this as well. Next slide, please. There's also, we're going to have some folks at the end of this sort of present a little bit too. One of the points that came up in September's meeting, which was to, try to push back, on the city to basically say, can we find a safe way in which we can do outdoor venues or outdoor performances? This group has met, I'd say 3 or 4 times, and it's included, Nick from ISD, Economic Development, the mayor's own COVID, staff, myself, a number of people from Bow Market, musicians, venue operators. I mean, we've gone through and enumerated a lot of things. I mean, luckily at this point, Christine and the Somerset division and myself are starting to develop sort of a protocol that, hopefully we'll get back out to this task force again and then provide some recommendations to the mayor. I know the mayor is sort of interested in wanting to hear more about what people are thinking, but I just want to let you know that we have been meeting about this. We have been trying to push this along. It's a slightly more complicated than we sort of all realize, in that in terms of combining different things and worrying a little bit about transmission and aerosol projection. But we've got a good group of people that are sort of looking at this, and we hope to get something, to the mayor pretty soon. Next slide. So this is more about the cultural plan. I'm going to turn this over to Kristen, and Kristen's going to help frame a little bit about what the work that we've been doing with MAPC, as well as sort of the breakout of the last cultural town hall meeting we had in October. And just to give you a quick overview, because I'm sure there's a number of people here that, haven't been here in the last 2 meetings as well.
Yeah. So hi, I'm Kristen Stelgis. I'm the Somerset director, and I'm really glad that you're all here this evening, and I'm really glad for all of you who were also here with us at the second town hall to discuss the cultural plan. So Sarah, if I could have the next slide. So why do we want to have a cultural plan? I know it's something that many of you have been asking for, but we really want to take a 10-year view through a participatory process and really look at how we can strengthen our existing assets. There is so much richness in the arts and cultural community here in Somerville, and we really want to make sure that those assets are thriving over the long term. So to do that, we want to formalize and strengthen partnerships within the artist community with external partners including developers and the business community, minimize our deficits, and continue to increase city and community support, and really think about how we're going to frame arts and culture and equity into the future. So to begin this conversation, we organized a second town hall meeting, particularly around what the community in Somerville wants to see in a cultural plan. So next slide, please. So we had 65 people come on October 28th, which was a great turnout. And to really make it more participatory, we had 5 breakout rooms. And so this evening, what we're going to do is to give you all a little snapshot of what happened. We're going to ask the facilitators for each of those rooms to share a little bit about that discussion, and Greg will kind of come wrap it up together and discuss the next steps. We can go to the next slide, please, Sarah. So one of the groups that I'm going to talk a little bit about this evening was a cultural planning and process group. So like, how do we want to organize our cultural plan? And I think one of my favorite things that came out of this group is that they said that there should be joy baked into the plan. And I think a lot of times we don't think about joy in public processes. We think about a lot of meetings, but I think that's a really wonderful challenge for us to think about how we can really make this a joyful process and really celebrate our arts and cultural community through this process. So some of the other things that were discussed is art needs money. And so how can we maximize the resources available to support our arts and cultural community? So what role is the private sector and what role will businesses play? Thinking about the scope of the plan. And I think that's going to be guided by you all and community and the group that's really going to dig in on the cultural planning process, and really define why. And what are we trying to achieve with this, which I think we need to come up with that collectively. But one of the things that did come up is, so for the why, is that there's been a lot of movement of individuals and organizations and loss in terms of artist spaces, which really amplifies the need for the plan. And I think this is one of the places where the cultural space task force and the cultural plan are really going to dovetail nicely, because a lot of that deep work on space and preservation of space and creation of new space will be done with a task force that can inform the cultural plan. And so that relates to how real estate is going to feed into that, which is also covered by the cultural plan, the cultural space task force. And really, in the whole process, we really need to have the perspectives of artists and cultural producers. So what support is needed for these individuals, for these organizations to really be thriving in Somerville now and over the long term? So I'm going to pass it on to the next group. So Sarah, if you could bring up the next slide. And Matt is going to talk to us about the music venue and space opportunities group.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. I'm Matt Cowiner. I'm the chair of the Arts Council Board. And I'll talk very briefly about this because we really, in our breakout session, focused on 2 issues that sort of intertwine in a fun way. One, obviously right now with space issues, we're sort of in an interesting position. One is really difficult position because we're stuck at home. Our spaces are going under. There's a lot of desperation, a lot of concern. But we all know we're going to come out of this. And I think there's a lot of concern for how to reactivate space once it becomes available and possible and safe to do so again. So I was really excited that most of our discussion was actually about how to energize and activate spaces once we can through parking lots, outdoor spaces, indoor spaces. There's a lot of concern for a lot of empty storefronts in the city, and that makes lots of sense right now. But we're hoping that there's opportunities in the future to activate those, to work out permits and the licenses, temporary agreements to sort of work and fill the city with more art spaces. And connected to sort of the concern with the physical space, we talked a little bit about sort of how challenging it is to find out about events. So once we're out of the pandemic and we can have events again, I think it was interesting that the group that came together deliberately, voluntarily to talk about music venue space and opportunities ended up talking about media a lot, and then information and retrospect that makes sense. If we're activating space, we want to make sure people find out about those events. So I think those are the two big ideas that came out of our group. All right. So I'm going to hand it off to the next person.
Thanks, Matt.
Hi, I'm Lynn Gervins. I'm the executive director at Mud Flat in East Somerville. And we were talking about production and dissemination. So this was about where are artists producing their work and living, and also how are artists getting their work out. We know that there's a ton of artists living in Somerville, but that many people are being forced to leave the city because housing is no longer so affordable. And so there was a lot of discussion about how can we find more artist housing, and along with that, how do we make sure that artists have studios to work in? Because even though there are affordable studio spaces now in Somerville, there are long wait lists at many of the group studio buildings, and some of those in the future may become unaffordable as well. And we wanted to think about how we could work with developers to think about working at the beginning of the planning process so that arts are more embedded into the framework of new developments. So the things that were happening around the 5% and 10% for art spaces is exciting, but maybe that could also include some gallery spaces. And were there other partnerships within the city or with other businesses within the city that we could be looking at? So thinking more about how we can move these ideas forward to be certain that there is space available for artists to live in and space available for artists to work in. And I'll pass that on to the next.
Thank you, Lynn. My name is Callie Chapman. And Stephanie Scherf and Joe Lynch and I were the group for performing arts facilities. And we discussed a little bit of, I mean, we focused a lot on the dance community currently, just because I think Stephanie and I mostly had some toes dipped in that realm. And the fact that Somerville doesn't have sufficient dance space currently, besides one dance studio that's there that doesn't act as a performing arts facility. We focused a lot on dance primarily because of that factor and the fact that dance requires a certain amount of things to be set up in order for it to actually work. So we were looking at potential other spaces that could be available. And I think Joe mentioned we explored the option of churches as one of those options, and how to create modular spaces so that, you know, if there was some sort of performing arts structure already built in, there's an ability to kind of plug and play to create that performing arts facility. We recognize that there needs to be dedicated accessible spaces for dance and other art forms. There needs to be potential for modularity to transform the space from one purpose to another. And then trying to figure out if there's multi-use options. So it's not just one serves one purpose, but actually can serve multiple purposes at once. And the other thing that's not on this is that recognizing that a lot of the dance community in the greater Boston area actually lives in Somerville. So it's providing them space for performing, you know, to perform in Somerville would be a high on the totem pole of like priority list for them, and much needed going forward. So I will turn the mic over to the next person. Thank you.
Anne, are you there?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me? Hello? I'm unmuted.
We can hear you.
Excellent. Thank you. Hi, I'm Ann Hirsch. I'm a public artist here in Somerville, and I'm glad to be here to review this final point of discussion moving forward with public art in Somerville. And I just wanted to start out by saying that I think, as with all of these issues, funding is critical. And if we set the question up of funding up as an either or question, in other words, do we want to fund public art or do we want to fund programs that support sanctuary cities or small businesses? We might be asking the wrong question, because in the case, especially of public art can be used to support so many other different efforts that we care about and are involved with. So I think I have a hard time imagining a way in which public art can't support any program that we have here in the city. So it's important that we support it in all the ways that it needs to be, because as we come out of this moment, we'll need more spaces to heal, to come together. And I think about how these past months might have been different if there had been more public spaces to gather in meaningful ways. It's wonderful what we've seen in this time. Greg, you talked about Somerville Remembers. That is just such an excellent program. And moving forward, I think that we've discussed how public art can and should be an asset. We need more of it. We know that public art across the country is being taken down because it no longer serves its communities, and in some cases it never did. But there's really an important place for public art, and we've seen how that supports community. We also want to consider how we use our public spaces, especially during this time. I think we've all become aware of how we are in public and how different we will be moving forwards, how we gather and the kinds of spaces that we need. That might be changing, and I think with that, public art can support new ways for us to gather. We talked about the Lawn on D as an excellent example of how private development can incorporate public art and the policies that are required to make that happen. We talked about Assembly Square as being a possible site for a Lawn on D-like development. And then again, policies to make it easier to build and maintain public art. And in my own experience, making public art, it requires a lot of different skill sets and stakeholders to be involved. And so that the organizational aspect of that really requires good, strong policy to support it. There's a lot more to talk about here, but it's really important that we have questions and comments. And as the last person to review the 5 issues, I'm passing it on to, I'm not sure whom now. Is it Greg?
Thanks. So yeah, next slide, Sarah. This is where if you are interested, I do think that the mayor is, very much committed. We're committed as a city to moving forward with this cultural planning process. A number of you, if you're, we have yet to, we haven't figured out a scope. We haven't figured out who we want to hire as a consultant. We haven't figured out a lot of things, but I do think that we're sort of on our way to, being committed to doing this. And if you want to be involved, more directly, then just email me. There's my email there. Obviously, we're going to make it, as open and transparent as possible. But just to let you know, if you are interested in playing a more active role, just let me know. So, at this time, I think that sort of ends our presentation. We intentionally also wanted to turn it over to you all. And if you have questions or if you want to bring up things, then just go ahead and maybe put it in the chat, and I can just quickly call on you, and that way you can just unmute yourself. This is a little bit different than a kind of a webinar based platform that the cities used before. This sort of a Zoom platform is different than the GoToWebinar. But if anybody has any questions, or even if you want to just make a comment, I know at some of the previous sort of meetings that we've had or I've had with the community, folks wanted to bring up some other issues potentially.
So is the how does the cultural plan fit in with the other cultural model that we've been discussing, the group meeting? Is the idea they would be the same, they would go together or be separate, or what?
I think, I mean, I can address it. The cultural planning process is more of sort of a formal process that would be similar to like Summer Vision, kind of a long range planning process, right? The Cultural Space Task Force, that group, I don't know if that's what you're referring to, Lee. That is, as Kristen mentioned, I mean, that's more specifically trying to look at zoning and looking at ways in which we can unleash the zoning. We do have this 5 and 10% set aside within those transformative districts, but truth be told, there's not a lot of specificity and clarity on how that's going to be enacted by both the city as well as the developer. So if you can sort of envision that the cultural plan will be a very sort of a much broader process, this Cultural Space Task Force is a little bit more narrow on issues of development, zoning, but they're very much aligned. Did that answer? Is that what you were talking about? Did that answer your question? Yeah.
Yes.
Question here in the chat about the possible 100,000 LCC funds. I mean, I think based on conversations with the mayor and the mayor's aides, we were sort of looking at this extra 100,000 that would help support the additional funds going towards LCC. What I'm anticipating as well is that we probably will use some of that money towards a cultural planning process as well. I do know that based on a conversation with the mayor, and the mayor is here, but you know, we are rolling out this 500,000 or 518,000 that we've got to quickly get it out the door. And, you know, that I think there was an internal agreement that come, you know, January, February, that we would sort of, you know, gauge back and look back, you know, have discussions with the community and see if there's an additional demand or additional need.
So, Greg,
the mayor mentioned that too.
Yeah, let me just add to it. So that's typically around, you know, our tax rate that we adopt has been certified, and we get that sort of final certification from the state right around mid-fiscal year, when we typically go in for any mid-fiscal year budgetary requests, because, you know, it's not just, you know, sometimes it's a position which not just in the current fiscal year, has to be carried forward. So sometime in January, we will give you, you know, I can't give an exact date. We'll update you on that. You know, we're committed to seeking that. And again, as you can imagine, there's a lot of uncertainty. Good news is, at least, I mean, not that it was a windfall for cities and towns. We didn't go too far backwards in the state budget. That's really good. There was always a fear of a mid-year budget cut or some other, you know, unable to fulfill commitment on the part of the state, given where we are. But I think that gives us a good platform based on where we are, what we see next year, to think about mid-year. So it's not a big number. We just want to be certain on that commitment. And we have a few other things we're going into the council with at that time. So stay tuned. Thank you.
I'm going to just try to go back in the order of Jessica Finch asked, what's the current policy or funding available for maintaining public art? And I'm not sure if it's maintaining as in conserving, or is it a conservation issue? I don't know if Jessica, you want to sort of qualify that more, but I mean, we do have money that we typically have been allocating towards different projects with murals and different opportunities that come up. We don't necessarily, I don't think the city has, I mean, the mayor may even be able to comment on that in terms of a conservation budget as it relates to sculpture. I know that we've done a lot around our, you know, our veteran memorials work. We do have an archivist on board now with the city, but I don't know if the mayor wants to comment.
Greg, I found that to be an interesting question, because I do appreciate one of the goals. You know, we need to treat art as an asset, and any asset that we create in the city, we typically have a preventive maintenance plan and plan for maintaining that asset and not letting it deteriorate. So admittedly, you know, we celebrate, want to put up art. I don't think we've given it enough thought, you know, unfortunately, about how to preserve that art. So that is something we should, as part of our planning together, we should consider, you know, what does that mean? And, you know, what type of art are we talking about? What do we need for resources to do it? I do want to just say on the resource part, because I do agree, it's not about making these false choices, one versus the other. I would encourage everyone in the cultural plan and what we want to do, we create the best plan that meets our community values and our goals. And then we work to find the funding. We fight to get the funding. And I would say the same here. It would be interesting to know really what our need is on a preventive maintenance side of, or excuse me, on the preservation side of any art asset. I would venture that, I would, gather that as we create more public art, that demand will go up, and that's fine.
Yep, and I was asking specifically about a piece that the firm I worked for helped create. And we actually had a meeting with the city. It was maybe like a year and a half ago and nothing happened. So we got some quotes and everything, but it was, it's a piece that I think the Neighborhoods Association was also asking for restoration of the Seven Hills Park sculptures. I work for Silver Perkins Design, and we had tried to get that restored. So it, and it just highlights for me that there wasn't really, I mean, we met with all the right people and did all the stuff, but there didn't seem to be any funding source for maintaining a piece like that that's very beloved by the community and obviously needs attention. So
Thank you. Actually, that helps on that particular issue, but in general, we agree. And that was in response to some activism in the neighborhood. We agree with that. We needed some repairs or preservation or maintenance of.
right.
For those of you who don't know, the figures on the poles in Seven Hills Park and any other physical pieces there, and we had committed to that. And we're not going to make excuses. A lot of the plans we were sought out to do, we've been delayed because of the situation we're in, but we are committed. So we should not dust it off, bring that Greg and others right. I think it didn't come through the Arts Council. If I recall, it came through Parks and Open Space and the Office of Strategic Planning and Community Development.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the arts component is real. And so I submit to my team, love to review that report, and whatever the funding we need to do to get it done, we'll get that done. But I would like to better understand and learn how we should be incorporating the preventive maintenance piece that you've worked on this particular artwork. I think, we consider that it is art, but I think we categorized it too narrowly in the open space parks department. We need to recognize that those components are going to overlap. And one of the things I think we need to address as we think forward and how we plan for public art and how that coincides with our plans and open spaces, and then how do we figure in the preventive maintenance piece. So thank you for bringing that up. And Greg, I'll actually Kristen Stilgis, if we can, I think Jessica, I'm reading on it one night. Is it Jessica?
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm just reading it one night, not too well either. If we can follow up with Jessica, and I know those in Davis Square neighborhood would be interested in this piece as well. Thank you.
Virtual.
Thanks.
And I mean, I just feel like it might be something to consider for the development funds or other community benefits to have something available for these sort of things as they come up. I mean,
yeah.
This one, I think it's a little more extensive, but from time to time, any mural or anything like that's going to need some attention. So.
And I do want to say, we do have a framework in this there, whereas we have a very robust capital improvement plan. We have a 10-year CIP, which we didn't have one at all when we got in here. Part of our planning and so pay-as-you-go capital is preventive maintenance. I think what we need to reconcile is the need to do it on, again, considering artwork as assets. I'm also, we're talking more sculptures and physical structures, but since we put a lot into the mural program, I'm curious as to what we should do more to maintain any wear and tear in the many murals in the community, and how do we coordinate that? If I just not well aware of how we do that. I'm sure there's a way to do that. If artists are no longer in the area, how do we make sure their work is preserved? And we like the murals on the wall that we don't allow it to, we just don't watch it fade away. So I think these are some of the things we should be considering.
Thanks, Demir. Stephanie Scherf had a comment and a question that she wanted to bring up.
Sure. Thank you, Greg. Good evening, everyone. My name is Stephanie Scherf, and I'm the Executive Director over at the Center for Arts at the Armory. I want to start just by recognizing the city's unprecedented support for Somerville's arts and cultural sector in the form of COVID relief grants that we've heard about tonight. Arts at the Armory was a grateful recipient of an award, and I just want to thank the mayor, the city officials, and city councilors for making this possible. The situation we find ourselves in is also unprecedented, as the leader of the Arts at the Armory, anticipate many months before my organization will be able to begin to generate event-based income. There are some organizations like Arts at the Armory and Artisans Asylum that requested more support than what was received. In our case, I requested 3 times our grant award based on anticipated need. I'd also like to take up the case for individual artists like Christina Tedesco, who as an artist living in Somerville is contemplating having to relocate because she lost her job and can no longer afford to live in Somerville. Just like at the federal level, where it is hoped that a second round of COVID relief funding will be approved, I want to urge the city to respond to the many arts organizations and individual artists who are in a period of ongoing extraordinary need. If we don't receive additional support, Somerville, unfortunately, is going to have to bid us farewell. I want to highlight the example of Once Ballroom, which recently announced its closure. Losing Once is a huge loss for the Somerville cultural scene, and as a part of a potential Highland Ave cultural district, we have lost one of our anchor institutions. I believe JJ Gonson, who is with us tonight, is going to share some comments about Once. So finally, just to wrap up here, tonight we're talking about the cultural plan, and in thinking about this plan, I want to urge that we have a more expanded view of the city's arts and cultural sector, which is made up of nonprofit and for-profit entities and individuals and businesses. I want to urge the city to commit to funding and implementing a robust cultural plan, but also to commit to a second round of COVID relief for organizations, businesses, and individuals who can demonstrate extraordinary need. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that. And we are fully committed to not just creating a plan, but funding it. You know, plans are like wonderful sunsets, I was told. We can look at them, appreciate them, but if we don't do anything, they go dark. So if we're going to plan as a community, we need to make sure we fight to achieve it, which is whether we're building a park or creating some other asset, develop the most optimal plan we want to achieve. Do not develop it on the backdrop of what can we afford. We can't afford not to achieve what we dream, and we will support that. You have my support on that. I agree, we need to, and we are examining what a next round of interim funding would look like. I'm very frustrated about the rigid interpretation, as I mentioned, of the CARES Fund Act by the governor's administration and A&F. I'm not going to sit here and just I'll complain about it, but I'm not going to let that us delay in seeking what else we can do here, because the need is there. As I mentioned, surely it's pretty obvious we have a need beyond the great work we did with the city council, with all of you. And I understand that the additional 100,000 in LCC is not going to be enough. So we need to work to fully understand, identify what that immediate need is, and we need to do that immediately. I can't even depend on anything coming from the feds anytime soon, or whether that will even be meet the need and necessity. I understand and saddened to hear, look forward to hearing from JJ that Once and many other establishments in the city, whether they're arts related or not, and then speak to my colleagues around the Commonwealth, very locally affiliated small businesses and entities are closing their doors. This is a point of a battle right now between myself, the leaders in the administration, that we need direct funding. We need direct funding to our local businesses, our small businesses, our main streets, and to artists in the creative economy and local entrepreneurs. And we need it now. So too much of what's happening with the pandemic is this false choice. And we'll hear from them, well, we don't want to take rollback measures because we're trying to balance. There is no balance between that. We can do both. We can take the necessary safety measures and keep people safe, be bold in that, and then add money to the people like yourselves who need it, and make them whole. And if you run a business, you and your employees as well. So we are committed, the cultural plan, my full commitment, and work with all of you to make sure we not only write it, create it, and we fund it, and we stick to achieving it. Two, on the additional relief. We are working on that now. We'll probably need to continue to survey people to understand what our need is. And we are meeting with my staff and others to understand anything above the 100,000 we can do in the very, very near term. And third, I'm not giving up on the other state funding. Myself and other leaders, we're fighting for that. I'm going to put out a call to all of you to continue that advocacy, especially in the different chambers with the Senate President and the House Speaker, because after today's meeting, I'm convinced they're not fully aware of what's going on. So thank you for that. Let me
just bring up a little bit of the speaking order. I know Zach from Bow Market wanted to speak, but if Christine Tedesco and JJ Gonset want to sort of complement Stephanie's conversation, Christine or JJ, do you want to come up and then we'll get to Zach?
Yeah, great. Thank you. And thank you for talking on behalf of me. A lot of artists, myself included, in Somerville had a good job, and we were just barely meeting ends. And now, unfortunately, I'm losing income. I've been here for 15 or 60 years. I forget. Somerville has become my home for me, and facing the choice between moving out and staying or not be able to stay is sad. And we are talking about cultural planning now, and that's great. I love that. But we need to be thinking about the community that the city's about to lose. If there's no artists in Somerville, there's no cultural plan. And I hope you all understood me. I was getting emotional, and
Thanks, Christine.
Thanks, Christina. So hi, this is JJ from Once. As I think most of you know, we found ourselves in a position recently where we didn't feel that we had any alternative but to announce that we wouldn't be reopening. There's just no revenue, and we quite literally can't pay the electric bill. So it was not a choice, I don't think. Certainly not a choice that we wanted to make. It felt to me like we didn't have any other alternative. We're currently going through a very, very quick process of trying to shut everything down. It's been pretty awful. There's a lot of tears. We've worked really hard, and we've, as you all know, we've sort of, I think, created something maybe a little magical that was never really planned, but turned out to be kind of a wonderful thing. And there's a lot of people who I think are really grieving the loss of a place, especially at a time when we are so far away from each other, and thinking that they won't have that place to go back to. We are hoping, the team, we've created a lot of really wonderful events together. We feel that we are more than just a physical space. We are a community. When we talk about communicating, I sort of pricked my ears up about that when the reporting about marketing, you know, that's something that I feel once has done very successfully. I was saying the other day, it's kind of amazing. We were in the middle of nowhere with no public transportation and no marketing, and we could still get 400 people out there to a show. For every dollar spent at a venue, we all know there's 16 that went into the community. This is, you know, the venues are not just taking a hit personally, but they're going to the impact that's rippling out. You know, they employ a lot of people. They put a lot of taxes back in through liquor. They obviously, people go to eat, they go to shop. I don't know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a long time before we're back in a model like we were seeing before, where a bar can sustain a venue. So we're thinking about alternative models, and, you know, as things very, very slowly get back to normal, if we're at limited capacities, maybe we can also be doing some virtual stuff, you know, to help to bring in some more revenue. But right now, it's really about, you know, can we find a space eventually? We're gonna have to kind of sit quietly for a little while. We'll do online. We have volunteers who want to keep doing some stuff online, but, you know, this is our home, and we're feeling pretty homeless. I guess we feel homeless, and the hope is that we can. I'm very inspired by some of the stuff I'm hearing here. You know, Rome wasn't built in a day, and I would love to think that maybe once has a place in this plan. Our goal is to be a community center for performing arts, and to be what I think the really, you know, the substantial difference between what we do and what the Armory does is that we like to get really, really loud. And there's people who like to see loud music, and it's a thing. And we understand acoustically how to make that work. We know how to book those shows. We know how to get people to them. We know how to keep them safe. I hope we'll get a chance to do that again. I think we're pretty good at it. So thanks for your time. Thanks for listening. We're, you know, hopefully we're not going to just be disappearing.
JJ, thanks for that. Hearing you guys should give everyone some determined optimism. Yeah, it's a bleak time, and I'm really sorry, because you're right. It is unheralded, and we don't pay enough attention to what institutions like yours contribute to the rest of our community, our culture, and to our economy. I do believe, yeah, there's definitely a home, and we got to find that. And I would say to all of us here, one of the things that, you know, not just in the artist community, but small businesses, where we need to work now. We are working here, and I know that my regional, local colleagues are doing the same, asking ourselves, you know, not waiting for the dust to clear and figuring out now what is the future of Main Street and what's that look like. And I submit, you know, the culture and the arts is integrated, has to be integrated in that conversation. You know, whether it's major retailers, thank you. Whether there's major retailers trying to figure out how to create that sense of place again, or to fill those empty major retail stores, which aren't going to be occupied by any tenant anytime soon. How do the arts and the creative economy even find a home to innovate there, to you know, help us capture the wins there where we had at our back before all this. I'm not a pessimist. I'm a realist. I do believe things are awful right now. I'm going to a dark time, but I'm a determined optimist, which your words remind me to be. So, you know, you'll get many invitations for this work we're doing, and we got to figure it out. I know in the meantime, I can't, it's unfair to ask you all to help us do the work, and I'll provide you the support to get you through this. We're going to work on it at the same time, I promise.
Zach Baum from Bow Market wanted to make some comments.
Thank you, Greg. As Greg mentioned earlier on in the town hall, a group of us have been meeting regularly to discuss what the process would look like for performances to take place outside, and we've been focused both on private property at places like Bow Market or the Jungle nightclub in the outdoor areas there, as well as in public areas. And what I'd like to ask today is what stands between Somerville and outdoor performance. We've put together what an application and permitting process might look like, and it feels like there's one step to go, which is the allowance for outdoor performances. So I want to ask that question as to what's between us and getting outdoor performances, and what might we do to move us closer to that.
Well, Zach, I appreciate the question. The pandemic, and I want to be painfully clear. No one wants to throw a bigger party every night, every day of the week, 24/7 than me. Performances, celebrations, civic events. Doing an outdoor performance now is really sets a contradictory message to what we're trying to get people to do. I understand there are valid arguments about we can do this particular activity, whether it's a performance or something else, in a manner that's arguably safe. But we have just crossed the threshold to a very dark time here. We have to be all buckled down to reverse the trends of community transmission right now, or we're not going to be able to get our local economy not only up and running to where we want it to be, but sustainable. I want to hear the ideas coming forward. I'm going to listen to them, work with you, but we're not fighting. I said this publicly on a television program on Browdy. We're not fighting the business community, artists, or the economy. We're fighting the pandemic. And I'm not trying to balance the choices. It's not a balance. It's all hands on deck to fight the pandemic. And what we need is to provide the resources for you and any other operation to get by this. And I'm all in on that. I'll do whatever we have to do here locally, and I'll fight the fight we have to do at the state and anywhere else. So that's where I just want to be brutally honest. And I think I need to be ethical with all of you and each other about why we're making the decisions we're making. And there's really no gray area. It is already bad. And it is getting worse. The more we rely, again, I'm going to assume that any activity you put forward, you put a lot of thought, it could be safely. Anytime we're going to rely on individual responsibility, although I submit we all have one to keep each other safe, but to help us reverse the trends of the trend of this transmission, community transmission, I think we're absolving ourselves as the quote unquote, as was stated in the Globe today, as our responsibilities as public officials and policymakers on the public health side. And know who's coming up short on this is the most vulnerable in our community and across every community. So right now is that I'm going to listen. I mentioned this to Greg. I'm going to give it full thought, but I'm not going to try to balance. And I'm going to be clear. You might not like it, the pandemic and the economy. I don't think that's a false choice for us to have to make. We need to keep everybody safe. We've got to reverse community transmission. If we're going to get our economy up and going again, if we're going to make it sustainable, and we need to fight, resources must come with it. I will put everything we have to do locally that we can into that. And I'm on a call right after this with regional leaders to fight with the state on that too. We're at a breaking point on the health side, and that's it. I don't mean to be dramatic about it, but I don't know how any other way to say it.
And I can appreciate that, and especially given the dramatic changes of the past few weeks. I think one thing that would be very helpful to, especially the folks that have, or definitely the folks that have been as part of those meetings, but I'm sure everyone on this town hall that would be interested in performing or hosting performances is what it might look like coming down from this. You know, when in the phasing cycle, or when in the when you know we hit certain thresholds, or when we hit certain milestones, might we anticipate those performances to be allowed?
Thank you, and I appreciate that thought and strategic analysis, because we want to know that, much like we want to know what civic events and when. Let's just assume we get to a point where things are going, and we pray things are plummeting down on community trend. There's enough vaccine getting out. We're going to reach a point, and I pray earlier than anybody else that I know some of our private events, and I have no doubt that many of you come out some pretty wacky ones based on what we just went through. Are we going to do, and what's that look like? We need to do that work. I want to get that all in place. I want to figure this out. So I'm looking forward to that presentation. I'm going to hear it and work with all of you to figure out what that is. And then we need to understand, reconcile it against, okay, when do we know? You know, what makes sense? So I think we can figure that part out. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be too bleak about it. It's been a long, frustrating trail for all of us. And to hear your stories makes me even more frustrated. And to see the sort of lack of urgency from some to do what we have to do now, because I don't think we needed to be here. But all right, well, I look forward to that. I really am. I'm going to pay close attention to it. I promise you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
I've gone through the chat. I don't see, I mean, there's a lot of comments, but I don't see anybody sort of posed. Does anybody have any other?
I think maybe
comments or-
Bridget's question about if you want to do a public art piece, how you get it approved.
Yeah. And then I have a couple of points also.
Yeah, and I think somebody had asked for a COVID update. I think.
Yeah, that was the one. Someone asked for a COVID update. Maybe you can give a brief. Let me just say, Greg, I think we'll get back to everybody on next steps and how we're considering not just 100,000, but anything above and beyond that locally for relief. We'll get a message out soon once we have a determination, which will move quickly on that. So give us a week at least to get back to you all. And Kristen, do you want to give it? Are you able to give a quick COVID update? Thank you for that question, for whoever asked it.
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I also put the link to our city's COVID dashboard that's updated twice a week in the chat. So you can go in and look at the exact data. So we are seeing, like the state, like all the other communities around us in Somerville, a rapid increase in the number of cases. When you look at the cases on a map, you see that it's very widespread throughout the community. There's pretty much no neighborhood that is untouched, which for us is quite concerning, and has led, as the mayor has said, for our mayor here in Somerville, as well as his colleagues in the region, to really try to advocate for responsible action to really try to curb the spread of the virus. And you know, we are seeing all of the indicators are going up. Cases, positivity, so the percentage of people who are testing positive out of everyone who's being tested, hospitalizations. The one piece of good news for us is that we know much better now than we did in March and April how to treat people who have COVID. So deaths, fortunately, are going up much slower than the other numbers, but we anticipate that as more and more people become sick and go into the hospital, that we will also see the deaths start to rise. So I wish I had better news to share with you all about COVID, but you know, we are definitely in a surge situation.
And I want to just add to thank you for that question, where we are in the regional context. I think you're all aware, if you're not, the governor made an announcement of rollback measures, which was really, I'll be generous and say was incremental, back to, I think 3.1, am I right? Kristen phase 3, but let's just say Somerville didn't even pass 3.05, and many of our surrounding communities didn't either. Back in, at the end of the summer, the governor moved to increase gathering sizes and moved to 3.2 in the phase, and I won't bore you with those details, but increased gathering sizes, capacities in certain places like restaurants, some bar activity, or eating at the bar. We did not do that because that flew in the face of caution of public health experts. I say I myself and leaders, I chair the Metropolitan Mayors Coalition, 15 communities around the inner core of Boston. Since the beginning of the pandemic, I've chaired statewide coalitions. We've been clamoring and begging for a regional approach on the pandemic to be smarter. We can't take measures on our own now that will have any health impact. At the beginning, we certainly did. We moved quick along with other communities to institute measures and policies and closures that helped work. And then eventually the governor came along in the state and we were able to flatten out the curve. To do that today would not have the impact if Somerville, for instance, went back another phase on its own. We really need to have a regional approach to it. And we've pushed the governor on this. We made it very clear to him. I was part of a group of 13 other leaders in the metro region advocating in an op-ed yesterday. And there's another communication going out to the governor from the same group and others to advocate to go back to an adjusted phase 2, which will curtail and pause temporarily activities such as indoor dining and health and fitness centers. Now, we'll say this, there are many places do a fantastic job, but that's not happening across the board. We're a very mobile society, we're a very densely populated community in a very densely populated region. These things really need to happen, but they can only happen successfully on the health front if we do it together. And two, that we compensate directly those businesses and employees who will be impacted. I'll use an example. I believe the state of New Mexico passed approximately a $330 million relief package, which included more than $100 million directly to small businesses. I think they're ranked 47th in the economy, and we're probably ranked between 4 and 7. We push this point hard to folks. So while this is happening in Somerville, we're not just trying to react to it in the context of our city, but we're really hamstrung here. We have to have a broad swath of the region take necessary measures boldly and definitively now, because we are out of time. The governor's announcements today, if it happened in early October, I would say, okay, that's a prudent step. We can measure for 2 weeks. Where we stand now, hours of days, days of weeks, weeks of months, you can think of it that way. And waiting for a vaccine, which is a light at the end of the tunnel, albeit a very long, dark tunnel, is not going to have its full impact until at least the summer, when the overwhelming number of the population could be vaccinated. In the meantime, the details matter. We still got to do all the things we have to do to keep each other safe. So I speak with passion and frustration because, I know the impact. If we don't have community, if we continue to have community spread, we're going to have businesses who are going to be impacted, not going to be able to open. In fact, we have businesses not only calling Somerville, but other community leaders in their individual towns saying, I'm just going to take a pause. People don't feel safe coming to my restaurant, and I don't know if I can continue on and dig into my savings, maybe open up. And we've explained this to the Commonwealth. We know people need assistance now. And more importantly, people are dying. So I say that so you have a snapshot. That's where we're at. We understand where we fit locally, and there's strong advocacy in the regional level. And today, well, I would say today's announcement, let's just say it's baby steps against a monsoon. It's not going to work right now. So we're going to continue fighting.
There's, thanks, Mayor. There's a couple of more chat questions that are coming up, and some folks are actually trying to, if Bridget would like to sort of raise the question or clarify specifically the question.
Thanks. Yeah, so I was wondering, like, if your project proposal includes, putting art like on the sidewalk or on the side of a building, what are the different, who do you need to go through basically to get approval for that, so it isn't, marked as graffiti or something?
I mean, if you have a relationship with a local business, so say if you wanted to do something, working with a local business owner, I mean, it is private property. I mean, one of the things that we've discovered is that, there can't be any sort of reference to what that business is, and then it becomes it's more of a sign, and it comes under a sign ordinance with the city. If people are looking to do things on public property, typically they've come to the mayor's office, or typically they've come to our office. We usually help them, navigate that. I mean, what we do pretty well, and I think pretty quickly in the city, unlike a lot of other cities, is I think we pride ourselves a lot on like sort of temporary public art, and the mayor has been very supportive of that. So, and we've done more sort of permanent things with, Susan Bursler, myself, and the mayor was supportive of sort of taking over those old phone booths and turning them into public art. It's kind of tricky to answer because there's so many varying things, but if you're working with somebody privately, it's very much about a private type of thing. So
Bridget, if you have any idea on public or private property, we'd love for you to bring it to us.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
the more abnormal, the freakier, the better. We'll help you get it through.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next, I think Allison wanted to make a comment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm a founding member of Brick Bottom Artist Building, and we're experiencing not only the pandemic, we're experiencing the never-ending construction around us that's starting to cause like a real exodus in our community.
And it's like, and then we like have been sitting on all these Zoom meetings about like really large scale buildings that are being, developed like in the Glass Stop area where it's going to be entire Glass Stop and Pat's Toe, where they're proposing a 23-story building with like 1,000 cars. And when they talk about the linkage money that the city's going to get, they talk about it like being the money to go to the schools, going to like pretty much every place but the arts. And, it seems frustrating to me, like to watch Cambridge with their percent for the arts, a formal program that like really formally ties 1% of the development to the arts program, that Somerville doesn't have anything so quite like this. And it's also frustrating for me to see the dump that is Art Farm that has been like, a brainstorm for a decade now. And, like basically at this point in time when we could actually have done something like the open air market in Central Square, which is so popular, that they were able to like move quickly and implement it, that we have this like lot that is just like a dust bowl. And it's frustrating for me as a member of Brick Bottom in the Brick Bottom region, that the cities, as far as we have had, been like totally empty promises. And like, so it's frustrating when you talk about mayor, like, let's not let like anything go dark. I would say Art Farm is totally dark, like, so it's, I know the pandemic has actually exasperated this situation, but I'm just saying is that without like a formal commitment to like actually implementing arts in Somerville, you're going to like have Brick Bottom be like a condominium, like, like the artist population's leaving here, that you're going to have like, things like the MBTA is developing the most grim sound wall, like barriers that are going to be cutting across Somerville. Like you come down to Brick Bottom and see how just like, really dismal it is visually. This is like going to have a huge visual impact on our community. And for some reason, I just don't feel like the city is putting, like, I feel like I'm hearing a lot of really good talk, but I actually feel like implementing action in the city to bring and support the art community is really like, lacking, that they're, the last time I saw Joe was when he was running as a mayor. He came down and said, yeah, Brick Bottom's going to happen, Brick Bottom's going to be happening. Art Farm's going to be happening. And I think like, okay, when are we going to see you again? When is something going to happen? Like, 2023. I am impatient. Anyway, sorry about my passion, but.
Well, thank you. No, Allison, appreciate it. And don't be sorry. It's fair to question, to call out, and to challenge where we're at. And that's what we're here for. And I do apologize. You are, and as many, but your neighborhood in particular, the construction is stressful, and it's more than just disruptive and inconvenient. And I'm looking forward to we'll open the Green Line 2021, and even for a lot of our communities. And it seems like we were under construction everywhere recently. And I'm looking forward to those cranes moving away, and some of the great open spaces, all these other projects moving out of the way. We can utilize those resources. It's a good point and valid one about, do we incorporate that 1% in the zoning? We do incorporate it, especially along the Green Line corridor and the Union Square plan. We set up certain contributions for community benefits. I think an important thing what we should do as we think about this cultural plan, is that enough that we're garnering from that? Understand what, if any, we're garnering for arts and culture. Does that meet that demand? Do we need to change that? We're very much open to that. And look, our farm, I'm all on board. Look, we got to get there. I agree. I'm a person like you. I believe it when I see it. I want to touch it, feel it, be on it, and utilize it. I can promise you, because of the work you and everybody in the community has done, it's going to be an incredible project. And it's going to happen on the dates we said. We're fully committed. And the funding's moving forward. I think we're already there. And we have a bit of just a reality check, logistical challenge in getting the pump station done and everything. Brick Bottom community, all the credit is they've been sort of a light there in an entangled web of infrastructure that didn't serve them or really anybody in the community. And I appreciate that. I recognize that. We're trying to work with you all to unwind that web and open up the community for the uses we foresee. So I'm excited that, hey, we worked together. We got the transfer station out of there. So the front door garbage dump was gone, and working with all of you to think about what that neighborhood looks like. But we don't want to lose, not lose what Brick Bottom established there. We want to build upon that, and I think we do that as a community. So I appreciate it, Allison. I understand, maybe my words probably won't fully satisfy that. I'm with you, and hey, we're going to see that stuff. It's going to happen, and we're fully committed. And I do think on the piece about the contributions directed to artists, I think we should delineate that more strongly, Greg and others, Kristen, and I don't think George or anybody from his departments on this call from the planning division outline or describe how that, to what extent that fully happens with our community contributions that we have as part of the neighborhood plan there. But if it's not strong enough, we should strengthen it. But we should make it clear to people how we utilize that at the present moment. Thank you, Allison.
Thanks, Alice. I don't know if there's I'm looking through a lot of these comments. If anybody else wants to.
Susan is asking to ask a question. Susan Bursler.
I don't.
Oh, sure. Sorry, at the very end. Sorry, I was scrolling up. Susan?
Sorry, my Wi-Fi is not working. I had a Verizon man on a pole outside my house just before this meeting. But is there any reason why we can't do what Somerville does best and be innovative in our thinking for when we do get to reopen for outdoor performance? And why can't we use Art Farm without any buildings on it to actually have events and concerts and performances there to sort of show the commitment to the space and what it's envisioned as? I mean, right now it just looks like it's a dumping site for the GLX, but why can't we bring that stuff over to Pat's and give it to them?
I don't mean to laugh. I like your idea, Susan. I'll say this, as I mentioned to Allison, it's fair to challenge our assumption. So let's challenge this assumption. Can we? I don't know an answer to that other than what was told to me last. So I'll share the challenge with you to probe that assumption, or for that or any other space. To think about where and when, how can we use that even for some sort of temporary or interim activity and how we do that at what time. So yeah, I'm happy to do that work and not just go through an exercise to figure that out. Greg, we should follow up on how we bring people into that meeting. And if we won't know the real answer unless we probe it. So I'm willing to just sketch it, shake it up and see if it works some other way. I just don't know that answer.
Thanks, Susan. There's no reason why. I think building on sort of the work that what Zach and this committee has been doing, and as we mentioned, we're going to present, what we're recommending to the mayor, and hopefully when the weather warms up just a little bit, we can, and COVID numbers go down, then we can start looking at these spaces, like we have in the past.
Yeah, Greg, I don't want to wait until that, certainly I don't want to get the impression we want to wait till numbers. We need a plan now. We need to get ready to go now. And I hope we're going to be implementing sooner than we're even imagining now.
Okay. Are there other, I see a lot of comments.
Yeah, I do say, we're going to lose the interpreter soon, but before everyone signs off, I believe Sarah Burnt put up, I was asked, I can't see too well, who to contact directly in advocating regarding the CARES Fund. It's there. I think before you do that, I want to make sure we get out to everyone exactly what we're talking about. There's a section of the CARES Fund that Massachusetts has not adopted in their interpretation of the federal act. So we can't get that money to you while the city of Boston has done it. But before you call, Greg, I'd ask that we send out to everybody in this call exactly what you want to ask for. So you're not getting yes to that, because I would submit they're probably not going to know what we're talking about, because I was a bit astonished today, and I shouldn't have been, that it was news to them.
Why don't we did some advocacy with Mass Creative as well. I think a number of you sort of were involved back in August. And what I think we can do is I'll circle back with Kristen and with the mayor and sort of be able to find out from you all, how many people, there's about 1,000 people that we've got that we had responded to through Mass Creative's online portal, getting emails. So, or if you want to email me directly that you want to get involved, what I can do is we'll circle back with, in terms of the mayor, with Kristen, the staff, and come up with sort of a statement that we'd like to have you all help put out there. I think that may be the way in which to do it.
And Greg, I don't know if there's
That's fair
another
to you.
meeting scheduled. One of the questions will be when will the next meeting like this be scheduled?
We haven't set one up yet. We had just set up these 3.
Well, I'm committed, we should set up the next couple in advance. So I'd love to follow up on where we are and what the next steps are on the cultural plan and all the other things we are doing, especially
Right.
Since we're contemplating more interim assistance going out. So we can get back to everyone. I'd submit, let's schedule the next 3. That's fine with me.
Okay. Okay. There was a question from Lee about, I don't know if Lee wants to comment, or it seems pretty straightforward question. Describe how the cultural planning development will go from here. I mean, one of the things that we wanted to do was have this conversation, or have you all have this conversation, so we can inform, the mayor about, what you did at the last meeting, what we've been doing, or what Kristen and I and others have been doing. And I think, going forward, I think that, we internally just need to sort of determine that we're going to move forward and derive a scope with that, and internally understand where we're getting the money, and we're starting to do that. We're thinking of potentially maybe forming, working with MAPC on this, Mayor. I mean, that was one of the suggestions or thoughts. We can do that through our partnership. I guess the cities have a direct partnership with MAPC to make sort of the bidding process a little bit easier. So that's one of the thoughts, Lee. I don't know if the mayor wants to comment on it, but that would typically be the sort of process. And then we can open up to have specific sort of community-based, gatherings about how we want to frame it, how we want to question it, how we want the consultant to come forward,
I submit that we should, my experience, and people can think about it and appreciate. First, I didn't say thank you for all of you who stepped up to help own that work. It's invaluable. We should work with all you to establish a work plan, where we go from here, and how, not just the remainder of the planning process, all the other components we want to execute, how we achieve that. I think that's going to be important, including the other organizations like MAPC, or others will be involved. And so that way we can in real time keep on track of it and move the project forward. We need to treat it as a project, not as something big that we're going to accomplish.
Yeah, I guess my question was, will we artists still continue to be involved with this process? It seems like right now we're just at a starting point, and we've only talked about sort of high level things. And then would that stuff be more developed with more input from artists, or do you feel you have all you need right now, or what? So
no, we want you involved. We would definitely want you involved. I mean, we
need you involved.
We want to create.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks.
I just sort of heard that we're going to lose our caption folks. I don't know how much. I think we're going to have to wrap this up pretty soon. Why don't we'll get back out to you. I think all of you, internally we'll figure out when we're going to have the next meetings, probably in January, and we'll set up another series of meetings, and as the mayor mentioned, and get back to you. But thank you all very, very much for coming out and sort of expressing a lot of, what your concerns about, and talking a lot about what we've already done, over the past few months. I think it's helpful for the mayor to hear, some of the work that we've been doing collaboratively, and to, bring him up to speed as to what some of the work that you all had wanted to address, 3 months ago. So.
Thank you, folks. Thank you for your work. We'll follow up real soon.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you.